This story doesn't start with orcs, or CG dragons, or flashy dye. It starts with lawyers.
I wrote my PhD dissertation on the open game license in Dungeons & Dragons.
I'm the co-author with Tuan Tran of an article called Intellectual Property and Tabletop Games.
I spent weeks talking to people across the unofficial economy of Dungeons & Dragons. Not the gold in the game, but the worlds that they've created within the confines of D&D. The real empires that have been made from imaginary ones. Can you just give us a sense of how your business gets put together?
Definitely is a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, but there are really a few big pieces of the puzzle and then a lot of little ones.
We're talking about close to 100,000 content creators around the world just pumping out D&D content.
These are people who have built companies out of their passion.
We raised over $1 million in like the first hour. I remember sitting there at this convention thinking to myself, who even am I now? Because, it was like an out-of-body experience.
But along with the modern media tycoons and the professional dungeon masters for massive parties,
Guy there had a dedicated D&D room that was tricked out like a medieval castle.
in addition to these fascinating business models, there is an underlying economic gamble that was taken in the early 2000s, and it changed the world. And all this is key to understanding the secret economics of D&D. But first, you are going to see throughout this video that a great adventure is a combination of preparation and improvisation. And that is why Saley is the perfect sponsor for this video. Thank you to them for making this possible. Saley is an eSIM service from the people behind NordVPN, and you can even get a discount at saley.com/PhilEdwards. But let me tell you who they are, what they do, and why I think they're the perfect sponsor for a video that is all about adventures. It's a digital SIM card that provides you a connection wherever you travel in the world and saves you money. You know this little dance that you do where you have to get a paperclip and become a surgeon? All right. Oh gosh. It is a digital SIM card, so no more fiddling with this thing, this tiny little SIM card, no more getting surprised by fees, and no risk of dropping this down a sewer grate in a foreign country. So what is the prep? You download the app, you sign up for a plan, and you are good to go. Then you get to the improvisation. This is the fun part. You'll connect to a fast and safe service without waiting to buy a card, which is very primitive seeming, or getting surprised. So it's preparation plus improvisation. Your adventure is possible with Saley. Check out my link at saley.com/PhilEdwards. Use the QR code that I'm putting up right now, or look for my link in the description. You'll get 15% off. You can also use that code PhilEdwards. And thanks to Saley for making this possible. Now let's get back to the adventure of this video.
And then this is one of the giant ones that I was talking about.
Whoa. So let's slow down for a second. My goal in this video is to give the people who know a lot about D&D some insight into the specific business models, and people who are noobs like me to learn about the underlying platform that powers this fascinating economy. So just so we're all on the same page, Dungeons & Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game, a TTRPG, started in 1974 by TSR. Tactical Studies Rules. I think that is basically the history you need to know at this point. It all starts in the analog era as an independent publishing company that is making money from putting out manuals and books. The game is similar in many ways to what you have today. A dungeon master leads their group through situations. Improvisation is wild and character-based with key rules governing characters and gameplay. Often you are rolling a die to help determine outcomes. There are a bunch of die, the mix has changed over the years, but you may have heard of a D20, the 20-sided die that kind of stands out the most these days. It is a world of magic, monsters, and adventure, and in this world of imagination, incredible artisans have emerged to make it even more immersive.
So I'm Miles, and I run RuneFable, which is an artisan dice company, and I am the director and artisan crafter.
I guess the first question is, how did you get into this?
Originally as a hobby, So I cast all my dice out of resin. I used to be a scientist before I started doing this, and left that career to basically do something that I enjoy.
Is it hard to get the die to weigh correctly on each side?
It's a question I get asked a lot, actually.
Yeah.
So I cast everything into and put it in a pressure pot, which pressurizes the air to around 50 psi. So it crushes any air bubbles to oblivion.
So I imagine that the main costs are probably your time, or is it material?
10 to 15% materials, and then sort of 85, 90% time.
Your business represents that there is a certain physical lock-in into having a certain number of sides on your die, right? Like
a lot of the system than sort of newer TTRPG systems out there, and old ones actually, either use a sort of D20 based system, or they use one of the other sort of common polyhedral shapes, whether it's a 10-sided, 6-sided, and 4-sided tend to be the often used other ones.
And this stuff is helping to make D&D more immersive. That's what I also love about Christoph and Cantrip Candles, which plays in this fantasy space and sells candles around the world. This is such a great idea, yet a unique idea. Like, how did it get started?
It kind of came from this desire to add another layer of immersion to Dungeons & Dragons, because I had started playing the game, I guess now it would be like 10 or 11 years ago. And it was great and super satisfying, but I have a theatrical background, and I'm all about like settings, spaces, and creating what little bits of layered imagination that you can. And so I just thought that the idea of like, well, I know I'll have an easier time pretending I'm an elf if it smells like a forest or something like that. It just kind of takes the threshold of buying into the imagination down like one tick.
Gosh, it's just such a good idea. I would love to be the candle guy for my group, like Joe has chips, Sarah has, whatever, Phil's the candle guy, and he just brings in a candle. And
it works. It adds to the space as long as it's effective. I think, yeah, candle guy is a valid role.
Are you selling most of them in the store or online?
Oh, no. We're mostly online.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, well, how are you affording a storefront in Los Angeles? And I said, we're actually affording a workshop. We need a space where we make our products, store our products, design our products, and that's what the Cantrip Candle store is for. We just happen to also be on Santa Monica Boulevard. We have a storefront, and I have an eye for making things very pretty. So the combination was, I kind of equate it to like a brewery. We make the beer in the back, we sell the beer in the front. Same with the candles.
And then there is Miguel, who is creating these incredible 3D printing designs for figurines. What is the number of models at now, would you say?
I think like roughly around 6,500 models so far, yeah. I needed a hobby, basically, because my girlfriend at the time, now wife, she would knit, and I would just come around after work and be like, hey, let's hang out. And she was like, I want to, focus on my hobby. I think you need one. So we played D&D, and she knew about 3D printing, and she wanted to introduce it to me. And I went over to the DC library, and, I learned how it worked, and it was, I was sold. So I made my first mini, which was a little itty-bitty black dragon, and Reddit loved it. And then made a blue one after that, and Reddit loved it again. And then I was like, well, I might as well do the whole monster manual. I'm already here.
So how long have you been doing this for now?
Well, as a hobby, I've been doing it for now a little over 11 years. And then professionally, I quit my government work in 2019.
They let people print their lovingly crafted custom characters as well as monsters in the D&D pantheon.
So there's one where it's a bunch of cats in a trench coat that I made. There's one where it's a bunch of parrots in a trench coat pretending to be a pirate captain. There's one where it's a bunch of goblins.
His Patreon, it is insanely large, with more than 8,000 paid members. With membership tiers at $1, but likely many members at $5 a month, you can do the math that this is a huge business, even though everything is basically free.
Here, cabinet that stores the resin printer. And then over here is the FDM printer, which is the filament printer that I use. And then over there's the painting station whenever I paint something, and military career, 21 years, summarized right there. I don't know what this strange stuffed animal is. It just showed up one day.
Okay.
And I'm not questioning it.
So I want to draw attention to how he is doing this. The downloads are technically free if they aren't commissioned works. And that's in part because of the unique way that the Dungeons and Dragons economy functions. Can you characterize what reputation D&D had in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s for people doing stuff with their work?
Belligerent, not somebody to be tangled with. I mean, they were the biggest publisher of role-playing games in the industry, so they had a lot of money. They were viewed particularly in the 1980s as a company that was on the lookout for infringement, or what they thought of as infringement.
Bob wrote his thesis about Dungeons & Dragons' unique approach to intellectual property, and Chris believes that TTRPGs, remember that is tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, offer a unique approach to intellectual property law.
What's kind of interesting about sort of in particular the board game space and more specifically the tabletop gaming space is that there are some IP rights there, but on the whole, they're relatively weak and they leave a lot of avenues open for creativity.
So it is in this climate that Dungeons & Dragons and TSR was kind of flailing in the 1990s. D&D was nearly dying and dead when they were acquired by Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Magic: The Gathering, the deck-building card game.
Magic: The Gathering. Magic is the ultimate battle of wits.
Shortly after that, Wizards of the Coast was bought by Hasbro, but it was described as a Pokemon deal.
First, let's talk about the basic Pokemon cards.
Then a Magic deal, and only then a Dungeons deal. Did Dungeons & Dragons make it into Hasbro's annual report that year? No.
But there's more to Cheetor than meets the eye.
D&D was in this relative backwater of a giant company that makes Transformers and G.I. Joes.
I'm speculating here, obviously, but I think that Hasbro as an organization sort of viewed Wizards of the Coast as kind of this interesting, kind of quirky, thing that was part of their corporate family, but wasn't sort of warranting a ton of attention. And so I think they had a fair amount of latitude to kind of be as creative and as experimental as they wanted.
So in 2000, something incredible happened. The OGL was published, the Open Game License.
I'll try not to go too far down the rabbit hole here in terms of like role-playing game mechanics, but with the third edition, which was released in the year 2000, it's marked by 3 seismic changes. So one is they changed the system of the game to what's referred to as the D20 system. They release much of the material, much of the core rule books under the Open Game License. So, which is an open content copyright license, which is the opposite of, not only what they historically have done, but the opposite of what most publishers do for most kinds of content. And they also, at the same time, make available a D20 trademark license. So not only opening up the content and inviting people to create new content, but allowing them to do so on a commercial level.
I think that you will come to believe that every business in this video should be viewed through the OGL lens.
And so my understanding is that when the OGL was developed, it really was essentially meant both to foster creativity within the tabletop gaming market, but more specifically for Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro to really make D&D sort of reclaim it as the sort of the standard or the norm within the tabletop gaming industry.
So the OGL was kind of taking the open source movement that was popular at the time, where programming was growing in this open and iterative fashion, and they brought it to games. This was the ultimate grow the pie strategy. And the pie, it grew. I want you to look at this image. I think there is so much here that tells us about the impact of the OGL. This is Pardon My Take, a show by Barstool Sports, the frat-adjacent media empire. It has a mix of definite sponsors and likely sponsors. What you don't see here is an official affiliation with Wizards of the Coast, because thanks to the OGL, Pardon My Take doesn't need it. And there is a professional game master in the middle, running them through D&D.
I don't know if that will hold up today or not, but I'm very excited.
Yeah. Tim Woods is a professional dungeon master, but he's also kind of a celebrity. He makes money being hired to play games. His public pricing shows $500 to GM a 3-hour game, and it goes up from there. How do you describe yourself? Let's start with that.
It always kind of depends on who I'm talking to. If someone is more deeply rooted in D&D versus if they're complete, like I consider myself a nerd amphibian. Yeah. Like somebody sits down and says like, I think I watched Lord of the Rings once, but I'm not sure. I'm like, hey, you're just as much of a D&D player as anybody else here. There's the one guy who is like, I put this together for my friends, and like he's the hardcore D&D player, but my goal is to like find the person who feels the most outside the hobby and be able to bring the hobby to them.
Could you just kind of like set the scene for me a little more?
There is sort of the unusual thing of like walking into a room full of strangers and being like, I'm your dungeon master for the... It's almost akin to like being a party magician or something like that. I show up, I know it's going to be weird. I know like 50% of the people are going to be like, so this guy does what? Like, does he do this? Like, I never am bothered when people are like, do you do this full time? And I'm like, unbelievably, yes. Like, and it's unusual in the hobby. So it's like not that surprising that people outside of the hobby would also be kind of surprised that this exists.
There's gotta be some crazy room though. Like, has anybody gotten like duck or something catered to one of your games? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
The craziest story I have is I got invited to run a game at a Halloween party in Florida. And this was in a neighborhood in Florida that was a gated community. They paid for my flight and everything to come down there. They got me a hotel room for the night of the party. And when I arrived at the party,
Mar-a-Lago?
It was
Mar-a-Lago?
It was giving me very Mar-a-Lago. And it was like there was a pool, it was an estate. There were multiple buildings, on the, like, I keep wanting to say like campus kind of. Like there was an area, they had brought in fire dancers, they had brought in performers, and like I was kind of put with the fire dancers and performers, like, hey guys, I'm the professional dungeon master. Like, what do you do? And I'm like, what do you guys do? And we were just kind of like, we were the help essentially, and like the entertainment for the party.
Now let me note here that technically you did not deny that it was Mar-a-Lago. So
no, I didn't. I have never run a game at Mar-a-Lago, nor for anyone particularly famous.
I just have to get it on the record. Just
absolutely.
That's incredible, though. That's an incredible story.
And so I noticed that on your site you provide discounted rates for other TTRPGs. Is that simply because you're like Led Zeppelin playing Stairway to Heaven over and over again, and you want to play one of the B-sides? I mean, is that...
No one has ever gotten it before, and that's exactly it. At this point, it's not that I don't still love D&D. It's that I have it down so well that the opportunity to do anything other than D&D. For my friends, I like, the truth is, if they were to ask me to run D&D, I'd be like, guys, I'm begging you, don't make me run D&D for you. But at the same time, just over the holidays, they wanted to get together for like New Year's, and I was like, listen, I'll run Vast Grim because I've gotten to play it at conventions and I haven't gotten to run it yet. And I'm dying to run this just to see what it feels like, and they let me do that for them.
Devin has started to do this at scale. Devin's platform, Start Playing, has grown hugely since 2020. Like a lot of people I talk to. How did you get Start Playing?
Yeah, I was running D&D games for a ton of people and friends. On the other side, my co-founder, Nate, he had always wanted to find a D&D group, but he never could. He was in Y Combinator. He was working on a project. He didn't like it. He was going to pivot, and he did that age-old advice, what problems do you have that you want to solve? And one of them was he could never find a game. He's like, I wonder if there's such thing as a professional dungeon master. So he Googled it, and he saw this Bloomberg article of this guy that also lives in San Francisco, also works in tech, and gave me a call, and I literally saw a random phone number the first day of lockdown, and I was like, I'll answer it. And we were on the phone for 4 hours that night talking about what the site could be. And the next day he asked me if I'd be his co-founder.
They've raised money, $6.5 million, from venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz to be the gaming platform of the future. Can you tell me a little bit about how the money element is structured for players and for the GMs? How does that work?
Everyone books into a game with a game master. The game master's like, I got 6 seats. And people will buy a single seat, or maybe they'll pay for them and a friend to play in that group. And then those people end up all joining. They end up becoming friends. I mean, I've heard about, one group, they're getting matching tattoos and they met on the platform and they're like best friends now. Everyone pays the GM a seat fee, and that's per session. And then we take a percentage fee of each GM. So very much like, an Airbnb or any other kind of like marketplace.
And is that 15% in 2025? Is that correct?
Yeah, we take 15%, and that's what we use for, like running the company, the ads, all that stuff.
Media is kind of these 3 overlapping circles of video content made for platforms like YouTube, actual plays, straight-up games broadcast for the masses, and adventures that become published merch. Jenny D has had massive success in this space. She's the type of YouTuber used as clickbait by other YouTubers. I've told the people on my channel that my pie chart kind of breaks down to 70% brand deals, maybe 20% AdSense, and 10% Patreon. But I'm like a total newbie at this. And then I look at what you do, and it's like dizzying.
My pie chart of income kind of breaks down to around 30% merch sales, 30% brand deals, sponsorships, 20% Patreon, and only really like 15% AdSense from YouTube. I just make like 1% or 2% from like appearance fees or like music streaming, just things that I do more for fun than for a major part of my income.
Can you describe who are the type of people who want to actually buy advertising with you?
I think the fact that sponsorships make up 30% of my revenue is because, like, the reason why that is such a big chunk of my income is because my channel is so specifically targeted. And so anybody who wants to sell to the people who watch my channel, they know exactly what demographics they're getting.
Are you like the equivalent of like an entire magazine about D&D, like in one person almost? Like,
yeah, I think that's a good comparison. Like, if you put an ad into like Chess Players magazine for your like chess set, that is a very well targeted ad.
When I check out your merch, that in itself, there are so many different directions that it goes.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I do that is more unusual in my space is I do offer like apparel and accessories and stuff because I like buying merch like that from brands that I like. I'm like, oh, let's have a fun, D&D themed water bottle. But most of the creators in this space are offering either books, like adventure content, content that you can use in your D&D games. That is, I would say, the biggest category of merchandise within the D&D world. Adventure books or supplements, downloads, PDFs or print books, just content that can be used in games. And then I'd say the other category is accessories that are used while playing the game at the table, which is like dice, Dungeon Master screens, rolling trays, stuff like that.
Sort of diagonal to this world is the one of actual plays.
And I grab like a bush, stick it over myself. I cast Pass Without Trace, and I'm like, look, check it out.
Jasper William Cartwright is an actor, and he is also floated in this world of actual plays. Actual plays have spawned massive, arena-filling franchises. That is a space that Cartwright has played in himself, and he also has a company, 12-Sided Studios, that helps other D&D franchises produce big shows, whether they're on video or live. What are you 30 years ago?
30 years ago.
What is something that we can use to understand you? Or even longer?
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe we have to go to the 1500s to understand you. I don't know,
Yeah, maybe. Right now, I would say I'm an old school theater producer who knows everyone. I'm kind of like the one that's like, oh, you need to speak to so-and-so. Yeah, no worries. Let me call them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing a lot of like picking up the phone. You need to meet this person because they're great and they're awesome. Do you know what I mean?
That is a perfect description. So you're the guy at Sardi's who's just, come over here. You got to meet.
Yeah. It's a smoky corner. Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting to me the difference between the YouTubers I talk to who have this brand deal portion of the pie for actual plays. Really, that's relatively negligible compared to Patreon support, merch, and then eventually in the golden era, the live shows.
Well, that's actually a pretty good segue to me boasting and talking about 12-sided studios, because essentially that's a lot of what I want to do, right? Like what I want to bring to this scene, because I think there is a huge kind of gap in the market for that kind of brand activation with these shows and with these stories. I went to the Critical Role live show in at Wembley Arena, 10,000 plus people in this huge arena, and nearly like 5,000 of them are dressed like Jester, like one of the characters. They're that popular. Because I know the team, they warned Wembley Arena before, hey, like have people on those merch stalls because it's going to be crazy, right? And I promise you, there was queues wrapped around Wembley Stadium.
But these aren't just media products, they are experiences in the real world. Elliot co-founded TPK Brewing in Portland, which creates custom campaigns that people can run through. I was in awe of this business model. Can you tell me a little bit about the idea of creating a campaign that specifically relates to the venue itself? And
basically didn't want to be like a tourist bar where we look like a cool D&D spot and you come in and you look like you're in a dungeon. It's great, but you never come back. And so thinking about what the gaming side of that means, we knew we wanted it to be a long-term running campaign, and then we'd build the community around that. So that means we do about 50 games total a week at the moment, 40 to 50. All the beer's brewed in-house, and then we do beer pairings that match what's happening in the in-game story. And then we write about 200 pages a month, I think, somewhere in there at the moment. So we have templates that they're following, and then most of the writing for the campaign is done by 5 people.
Where do the costs come in for me as a player? Like, what am I... Yeah, can you just kind of break that down for me a bit?
It's $250 for the chapter. So you're signing up for 6 sessions for $250. That includes 1 drink per session. You get at least 2 pieces of swag that are kind of campaign-specific moments. The one tonight, which this will come out after so I can spoil, is they're in the Scorchlands, which is kind of a Western-themed environment, and they're getting like bandanas, bandit-esque bandanas that are all themed around the Layfarers, which is our custom setting. And so in the game, they'll be getting those to mark who they are and kind of that they're peacekeepers in this world, and then they'll get that physical souvenir of the campaign in person.
Is there like a pie chart sense of how that works for y'all?
It's almost entirely staff, payroll expenses. We do have a number of artists we work with who produce maps and then art assets, but relative to the cost of the staff, I don't have a pie chart, but it's probably 95 staff costs.
You can see that this massive value is happening in the Dungeons & Dragons economy, and Wizards/Hasbro, they're benefiting a lot indirectly, but they're not getting a direct cut, which is why it is both mind-blowing, but also a little obvious that they almost destroyed it. Hasbro and Wizards threatened the entire OGL in late 2022. The OGL is open. In the 2000s, retro clones quickly emerged that sought to fork or branch out from D&D. In 2009, Pathfinder from Paizo was built on the OGL but made by a totally different company. The D&D boom in 2020, however, that made Hasbro reconsider the whole model.
And I do think part of it was essentially an attempt to sort of recapture some revenue to say, hey, folks, third-party publishers and the whole ecosystem had been built up over 20 years of a variety of sort of well-known third-party publishers in the D&D space. They say, hey, look, these companies are making all this stuff off our system. Why aren't we getting a cut of the pie here? But the OGL expressly foreclosed that, right? It was non-commercial. But I think even more pernicious was that the new OGL actually required anybody who created content under it to essentially grant Hasbro a sub-license to it, right? Which would open the door then to Hasbro essentially saying, okay, you've created this work, but we're going to now, under our license, right, we're going to do something else with it.
It changes the tenor of the ground rules, right? Everybody understood, okay, well, we now have this license, both sort of in the sense of the noun, but also in the sense of the verb. Like, we have permission to do these things, and now you're trying to take it away from us, right? Like, you're reverting back to an old model which just doesn't work anymore and which shouldn't work. And there was some really furious backlash to that move.
The OGL is a hot topic. It's a slightly less hot topic now than it was, but there are a lot of people who have made hating Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast their whole personality.
To me, the OGL issue was always based around, and it was so poorly handled on Wizards of the Coast far, they couldn't name Critical Role. But the way they initiated and then backpedaled was very much them being like, we're coming for Critical Role's money. And then everyone got upset. Everyone who's making their own dice, who is running their own games and so and doing little streams and everything.
Over the years, they had tried to get in on the D&D boom through the use of official platforms and all sorts of other mechanisms to make D&D easier and more fun to play. But they wanted more.
I do think that the OGL and everything that happened did make a lot of creators and a lot of the audience go, well, actually, hold on, there is some really other, some good other systems, and it might be a little uncomfortable and a little sticky at first to sort of get the audience where we need them to be, but maybe we should just invest some time and energy into doing that.
Hasbro became a villain for D&D players, even though they reversed course and put the OGL in Creative Commons. That's kind of where Matt Colville comes in. He could have been in the sections about media because he has long run a YouTube for Dungeon Masters, and he is enormously influential within the world of D&D.
6 years ago that we launched our first crowdfunder.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, this is going to be a great opportunity. This is what I thought. This is how naive I was. This is going to be a great opportunity for my friends who are almost all millennials. This is a great opportunity for my millennial friends to finally be able to buy a house, right? Because we'll have our day jobs. We'll keep our day jobs, obviously, right? And we'll have a little bit of something on the we'll have a side hustle, and the side hustle will pay. And we raised over $1 million in like the first hour. We started a company, and I hired those people that had been helping me. And so in the years since, we've had more success. We've had more crowdfunders. These were originally all done for Dungeons & Dragons, third-party D&D content. And we hired more artists. We hired producers. We've hired full-time designers now.
Are people going into a salary situation or freelance? How does that work?
That's part of the way MCDM is very different from the way other companies in this space operate, is that we pay people salaries that are appropriate to a full-time video game person who lived in Orange County, California. And that means that there's no one at this company that makes less than $100,000 a year.
And so can you walk me through the chronology of when you all decided to kind of transition away from 5e compatible stuff and get into your own world?
2022 is when we first started talking about our game. And this was the time when I believe we were working on our monster book. So the full-time job was, so we're always thinking about what's next. So we were working full-time on the monster book, but we'd have this other channel in our Discord for the RPG, unnamed, and we would just talk about systems we liked and things we thought were smart and things we wanted to do.
Interesting.
And then we started to get emails from Wizards of the Coast about the license. We had this rocket ship we were building in the backyard anyway, and Wizards of the Coast ran up and lit the fuse and ran away. And we went, oh God.
His company's game, Draw Steel, has raised $4,600,000 on Kickstarter. And it's an apt symbol for a rapidly diversifying landscape in which content creators from actual play stars, Critical Role, to sci-fi auteurs are starting to push their own splinter TTRPGs. Draw Steel includes its own license, like the OGL, but even more expansive. Can you tell me a little bit about the Draw Steel license, both the impetus for that and what it does?
It basically says you can't have our art, but everything else is available. All of our fiction, our characters, our world, our game. Do what you want with it. The only thing you can't do is you can't try to trick people into making them think it's an official Draw Steel product. We believe in the community and that it is a creator-led community. And that means they need to be free to make stuff and share it. And if they want to make money off it, knock yourself out. And we even think there could be a future where we reach out to these people and say, hey, that thing you made is really cool. How about if we spend some money, get you some better art, and put it in our store?
That is why you could argue that this whole video should be called The Secret Economics of TTRPGs, because everyone is starting to work in a wider landscape. There are two big things that attracted me to this video, even though I'm not a D&D player. The first is that the OGL is really the realization of this open source dream. And I think the fact that I haven't felt personally betrayed by Wizards or by Hasbro lets me see this a little more clearly. They saved D&D with an incredibly innovative gambit, and that is fascinating. It also provides a lesson for other companies that are trying to turn their product into a platform. The second thing that attracted me to this topic is that it is a testimony to the creativity of D&D players. I mean, these are smart, incredibly creative people who are building worlds inside the game. So it makes sense that they're going to want to build businesses that are just as exciting as the games that they play. But all of this is not in service of money alone. It's in service of making new memories.
Like, a really good example that I always give is me and my some of my male friends. You know, we're probably not the best at saying, "Hey, dude, I'm really struggling at the moment. You know, any chance we could just call and have a chat," right? Like, Dungeons and Dragons, especially during lockdown, was just this excuse every week to just get together and to see your friends.
I've played it my whole life, all the way through childhood, through both of my Iraq deployments, like when we would come back from a patrol or come back from the daily routine, and like I had a D&D game on the side that we would play when we could. Like, it's always been a part of my life. That's just a nice way to escape from the day-to-day, hang out with friends, and just have a good time.
I know the people that I play D&D with better than almost anyone else in my life now because we see each other so often and we spend hours and hours together just being creative and being silly and like sometimes being emotional. That's just something that very few hobbies afford you the opportunity to do.
Okay, that's it for this one. Thank you for being here and making it to the end. It's pretty amazing. If you haven't been here before, on this channel, I look into the history of business and technology and stuff that's going on today and try to explain it as well as I can with the help of people like the awesome people that I talked to today. This video was long, but I still feel like I left out so much stuff. So I've got links to all their info in the description or in the notes. I also write a newsletter for every video that gets into something that I couldn't get into in the video proper, and it lets you know when I have a new video come out. You can sign up for that on Patreon, but it's free to sign up for. The topic this week is what I actually spent most of my time talking to Bob and Chris about, which was the sort of legal weeds of the OGL and how it works to protect copyright, trademark, patent games, whether or not that's possible. It was a little too much of a text topic for a video, but I think it's important and fascinating, so you can read a bit of a summary on my newsletter all about that. I also do a reaction video on Patreon for paid subscribers, and there's enough that I cut out of this video that I would love to share with you some of the details and behind the scenes of the interviews that I couldn't include in the video proper. So yeah, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. This is the third secret economics video that I've done, and I'd love to know your ideas for future topics, as well, of course, as your opinions on the secret economics of D&D. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.